Thank you for joining us for the SAJA Annual Awards and panel discussion. We are presenting a conversation, Hope and Resiliency in Journalism, a talk about how we navigate, manage, and grow in our industry after an unprecedented and challenging few years. If you have not already done so, please RSVP at saja.org for a special virtual hangout happening directly after this show. Our moderator is Sarah Khan, Editor-in-Chief, Condé Nast Traveler, Middle East, Versha Sharma, Editor-in-Chief, Teen Vogue, Geeta Anand, Dean at the UC Berkeley School of Journalism, and Swati Sharma, Editor-in-Chief of Vox. A special thanks to our sponsors, the New York Times, NBC Universal, Digimentors, and the Gower Family Foundation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mihir Zaveri, President of the South Asian Journalists Association.
Good evening, or afternoon, or morning, depending on where you're coming from or viewing from, and welcome to the South Asian Journalists Association's annual awards night. My name is Mihir Zaveri, and I'm the president of SAJA. This is our biggest event of the year, and we're excited to bring you some awesome programming, put together over hours of tireless effort by our board and many other helpers. The theme of the night is Hope and Resilience. We're hoping that, after yet another year of adversity, you can walk away from tonight feeling refreshed and inspired. Here's how we're going to do things tonight. First, we're going to have a stellar panel featuring some of the top minds in journalism. I'll introduce our moderator shortly. After that, I'm going to announce the winners of this year's SAJA Awards. And finally, at 7, we're going to do something new, something I'm really excited about, a virtual after party, when you can actually walk around in a digital room, join and leave conversations, and generally recreate some of the social atmosphere SAJA has fostered in previous years and that we have missed. You'll need to register for that, so we can send you a special link to access the room, so you can do that at our website, saja.org. I want to thank our sponsors for this event, as I mentioned earlier, the New York Times, NBC Universal, and the Gower Family Foundation for helping make this evening possible. And a big thank you to Digimentors for their invaluable help in producing and broadcasting this to all of your computers for the second year running. Another note, as I just mentioned, we're broadcasting this event, and you can follow it on our Facebook and YouTube page. You can write to us in the comments there as the event progresses. And we're also streaming on Twitter. So retweet or comment with the hashtag SAJA2021, or you can just sit back and watch on our website. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the panel, Sarah Khan. Sarah is the editor-in-chief for Condé Nast Traveler Middle East and a travel journalist, which has probably been pretty challenging in this past year. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Mihir. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and good evening to everyone out there. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you virtually tonight. Hopefully next year we'll be doing this in person. But SAJA has been such a huge part of my career since I think early 2003 maybe is one of the first times I attended. So it's really something I'm very excited to be a part of, and I'm looking forward to moderating this powerhouse panel this evening. So the theme of tonight's panel, as Mihir mentioned, is Hope and Resilience, and all of our panelists have actually ascended to really remarkable leadership roles during the pandemic, despite all the challenges that we've seen. So I think there'll be some really meaningful lessons for us all this evening. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists. We have joining us Swati Sharma, Editor-in-Chief of Vox. She was previously a managing editor at The Atlantic, Deputy General Assignment Editor at The Washington Post, and an editor at the Boston Globe. Then we have Versha Sharma, who became editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue in May. And prior to that, she was managing editor and senior correspondent at Now This. And Geeta Anand is dean of UC Berkeley's journalism school, and her stories on corporate corruption won the Wall Street Journal a Pulitzer Prize in 2002. And she was a foreign correspondent for the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. Her book, The Cure, was made into a Harrison Ford movie, Extraordinary Measures, in 2010. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
There they are. So let me just start out by saying how excited I am. This is a kind of a bit of a pinch me moment for me because I've been marveling actually to all of my friends behind the scenes for a while now about your hires and the roles that you have and just how different the landscape is for journalism now than when I started 17 years ago. And I would have loved having South Asian female role models like yourselves as I was starting out. And it's just amazing that the next generation has just that through women like yourselves. So thank you for being a part of this. And I just feel like there's going to be a lot of really interesting lessons. And I hope there's aspiring journalists joining us tonight too to learn from you all. So first, to kick things off, I'd actually like to start with Geeta, because I know that you're at a very interesting position because you've been at this intersection of journalism and education, both areas that have been really deeply impacted by the last few years. And so I guess, how have you worked to really energize the students and motivate them at UC Berkeley and really kind of get us through this time to where we are today?
Such a good question. Two things. When the pandemic struck and we were ordered to shelter in place, we realized that the most meaningful thing we could tell our students to do would be to practice journalism. And I was really excited that the faculty of the journalism school voted to allow students to drop classes and instead function or work as reporters for the New York Times covering the pandemic in California. Half of the student body ended up getting published in the New York Times. So we did it by making a path available to our students to actually engage in journalism at this critical moment. And then secondly, the racial reckoning happened. And at that time, I had just become dean of the journalism school. And the most meaningful thing I could do and our school could do was seize the opportunities this moment offered to change our school, to take the limits off who gets to be a journalist in this country, to take steps to try to change our industry. So we engaged deeply in the journalism of the time and also in the opportunities for diversifying that came about, for changing our school that came about.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that even in what I've been doing with travel journalism, it's just been really inspiring to see the sudden move towards people really appreciating and recognizing the need for diverse voices. And it really starts at what you're doing with the journalism school and with aspiring journalists and all the opportunities that they have now to really be heard in a way that they haven't before. So Versha and Swati, I know you both transitioned to really high profile roles at two major organizations during the pandemic. So I'd love to hear from each of you about how that came around and what made this the right time for you. So maybe we can start with Swati.
Yeah, hi. And I just want to say I'm so happy to be here. SAJA has done so much for me. I served on the board a couple years ago, and it was such a fun time. And I'm just so great to always see how, it continues to grow. And I also want to give a shout out to someone I have always looked up to, Geeta Anand. She's, just a legend and is so incredibly amazing. And I worked, at the Boston Globe at the same time as Geeta. So I'm always just watching what she's doing. And so it's really exciting to be on a panel with you, Geeta. Hi. And with Versha as well, who, just amazing to see, two Sharmas taking these roles in this moment. So, I was at the Atlantic. We had just an amazing year. A tough year, but I think our journalism was, some of the best out there coming the pandemic. So I wasn't necessarily looking for another role, but whenever I get approached with opportunities or whenever there's an opportunity I want to go after, I always think about the reason I'm in journalism and the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Which I think everyone needs because it can be hard now and then. But for me, I'm a journalist because I believe that ignorance is a cause of so many societal ills, and knowledge is something that can fit that. And especially if you can get information to communities that aren't traditionally reached by mainstream media. And, Vox, that's what Vox is about. Vox doesn't write for the people in power, but it writes for the public. The work that Vox does is approachable, and it's meant to take the most complicated ideas and make them, digestible for all types of people. And, and it really the publication believes in offering moral clarity and really helping people live better lives. And I thought that if I can work at a publication, that I can just, bring everything that I learned from the Globe, the Post, and the Atlantic, and, try to be a new kind of leader. I thought that this would be an amazing opportunity to do that. And so that's why I took the job, even when I was in a good position, even though it was, during the pandemic. And I'm really glad I made it. But of course, it wasn't easy to do. And there's so many SAJA members who helped me make the decision and continue to give me support and advice, on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like the amazing support that SAJA, I think, has had for a lot of our careers is definitely has been very impactful for me, for sure. And I think also just what you've been doing at Vox. I was a freelancer until not too long ago, and some of my most meaningful stories that I did in the last year during the pandemic were actually stories I did for Vox, because I think the way that you have really handled a lot of the coverage has been really thoughtful and nuanced. So thanks for giving me that platform. And Versha, so I'd like to move to you, because obviously this was a very high profile move that you did earlier this year. I was really excited to see you taking the lead at a Condé Nast publication. And so what made you kind of do that at this particular juncture in your career, and also where we're at in the world today?
So prior to this, I was at Now This for 7 years. I was really with Now This from the beginning, from a company that nobody knew who we were in 2012 to 2014 to what it is today, which is one of the biggest social video news companies in the world. So I kind of always knew after the 2020 election, I wanted to see that out at Now This, and I felt like that was a natural time afterwards for me to take stock of my career and look for the next opportunity. I couldn't have predicted what happened this January with the insurrection and the second impeachment of former President Trump. So I wasn't necessarily expecting that at my time of looking for other opportunities. But I think that really underscored what Swati was saying about the importance of journalism, especially when we're talking about the fight to protect democracy, I think, and the importance of a free press. And so what I really loved about my work at Now This, and what I continue to love about Teen Vogue, is the emphasis on young people, the issues that young people care about, the change that they're pushing in their communities around the world. And I think once I found out about the opportunity at Teen Vogue for the EIC position, that felt like a very natural fit for me, because I am very passionate about all of these same issues, whether it's the climate crisis, or social and racial justice, politics, of course, as well as pop culture, and the way that change is being pushed in all of these areas and industries. So I see a lot of editorial overlap between the Teen Vogue and Now This audiences. And it was also an exciting opportunity to go from, again, 7 years of startup world to this much bigger company, Condé Nast, and learning just the ins and outs of what it's like to work at a publication like Teen Vogue within this bigger company.
And I guess I'd be really curious to know from all of you, but let's start with you, Versha, just what some of the interesting adaptations and innovations have been in your newsroom over the last 20 months.
That is a great question. I mean, I think I couldn't have predicted where exactly we would be in May and June when I really stepped into this role in terms of what the COVID cases looked like, both in New York and around the US. But I think the flexibility that we've had in newsrooms these past 20 months to actually work fully remotely has been so key, and is something that we need to incorporate going forward, because it has allowed, I think, for better work, for better reporting, for being more inclusive of people across the country and not just in the big media centers of New York, DC, LA. And so I think having that and being able to collaborate remotely as well, remotely, virtually, have great conversations just like this one, has been a strength that's come out of the pandemic. It's forced a lot of newsrooms and companies to adapt to the most modern technology that we all need. And so I think that has been a benefit that we should continue to push forward on.
Great. And then Swati, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, totally. One thing I did in every job I've taken, whether it was the Post and the Atlantic, I would spend a good amount of time like learning the newsroom, because the Atlantic is not the same as Vox, which is not the same as the Post. And I think one of my, something that I offer is, because I know I'm not I know my parents weren't journalists. They were, my dad's an engineer, my mom is a homemaker, and I did not come from a journalism environment. So I really had to work a lot harder in understanding how newsrooms work, who actually makes the decisions. It's not always the people who have the power and who have the title. And so, when I came to Vox, I did the same thing, where I really learned what the institution was about. I learned, what was the Vox's mission and how we can make sure each story, each idea that we have lives up to Vox's mission. And that's what I've spent. I've been there about 7 months now, and I've spent my time learning what Vox is about and really listening to people and bringing in the kinds of things, the processes you need to make sure that happens. But more than that, really working with people in, helping them find their beats, helping us just really know who we are and what we're doing. And that has, we see it in the work, and we're using this to, make hires and bring more talent on. And it's really the thing that I think will continue to make us distinctive, because I think in this environment, every brand has to be distinctive and offer something specific. And I'm just trying to strengthen Vox and make sure we are offering something distinctive.
And that's definitely so critical. And I feel like you've definitely done it so effectively, because everybody can recognize a Vox story and what the tone is and what we're going to get. So well done to you and your team. And then Geeta, I know we did chat a little bit earlier about some of the interesting ways that you've been able to energize your students, but what are some of these other innovations that you've seen that are going to outlast the pandemic and just the new way of doing things at UC Berkeley now?
So one of the astonishing things is just how well we discovered we could teach online. Like, you would not imagine you can teach documentary film online or teach intro to video online. Yeah. But to our astonishment and great success, we were able to do it. So we now know that some kind of hybrid model is ideal. We do know for sure that, I think colleges across the country have seen this, and high schools, that students' mental health has really suffered. So just remote online learning and living is just not the solution, but we need community and connection. That said, some wonderful hybrid model is what we're going to evolve into, that can hugely improve opportunities for people to get journalism educations and all kinds of educations, and access can really be improved by making online learning available. So we learned a lot, but nothing is a silver bullet, and there's challenges with everything.
Definitely. But at the same time, what you're saying about access is so key, because I think we've seen that across the board. Just this, some of the adaptations that we had to do with Zoom and with the lack of travel have actually given opportunities for people in other regions to access things like education that they might not have been able to do in person. Or in my case with travel journalism, which has been historically not very diverse at all, there's now a lot of opportunities being opened up to journalists in different countries and different markets, where typically a American travel journalist might have helicoptered in for a week, and now they're actually having access to meet these editors virtually and really get a lot of interesting assignments. And so I think for me personally, as a travel journalist, this kind of inclusivity and bringing more voices into the field has been incredibly important for me. And I think what I've always said is it's not just about the writers and the talent, it's also about the masthead and diversifying who's behind the scenes creating these stories and envisioning the future of these publications. And so I think I'd love to hear a bit more about, I know Versha, you had touched on it earlier too, but just how in your positions you're able to champion diverse perspectives and bring different voices into your publications and organizations. So Versha, maybe you can start off there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had to give the same shout out that Swati did. I'm just so excited to be on this panel with all of you. And my dad is also an engineer, so that's not surprising at all. But I'm so happy for all of us succeeding in journalism. I think, it's been really interesting. I've worked in digital journalism, largely in New York for 12, almost 13 years now. And I have gone from being, both the unpaid intern to where I am now, and also sometimes the only woman of color in the room, sometimes the only person of color in the room, to again, where we are now with this amazing panel with 4 women of color leaders in their field. So I think we have seen some really incredible progress in the industry that has come about because of our mentors, because of organizations like SAJA, because of people who have come before us, who helped pave the way and who also helped lift us up and recommend us for jobs. And so that's, I think maybe priority number 1 that I have is to pass that along, to keep the door open for people coming after me, to pull up more chairs at the table, and make sure that we are including just as many diverse perspectives as possible. Because I think, as we also know, there's no such thing as one type of South Asian, right? Like our own community is so broad and so diverse in so many ways that we're just starting to understand right now. And so I think being in a position of leadership right now, being actually able to hire people, to offer jobs to people, which is also one of the most exciting parts of my work, I think, I make sure that I'm prioritizing diverse perspectives and backgrounds, and on many levels and in many different ways. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do as leaders, is to make sure we're continuing to listen to young people or to less experienced people who are looking for advice or who are looking for experience, and make sure that, again, we are just leaving the door open for them.
Definitely. I think even I've only been in my role for a few months, but just the opportunities I've had to identify new up and coming writers and really elevate them and bring them in and work with them to shape their writing. As after having been a freelancer for 8 years, it's just been so exciting to be able to work with other people on their careers in that way. Swati, would you like to talk about how you're doing things at Vox?
Yeah, I would love to. I'll group it in 3 ways. So one, there's hiring. And for me, I believe it's every person in the newsroom has a responsibility to think about, diversity and inclusion when they're hiring a newsroom. I just feel like, I think, and it's not because this is a DEI initiative or it's like a trendy thing to do. I really believe you're failing at journalism if you don't have a diverse newsroom. And that is something that I make sure is clear, to every person at every level. It comes through in the coverage, and when you're assigning freelance, even in the visual journalism that we have. And so I think it's just important for every person to play a role and feel like it's their responsibility to create a diverse newsroom. And then, the next part is the culture that I'm trying to create. I also think that the journalism is only as good as the culture of the newsroom. And, as Versha was just saying, we don't come from backgrounds that, where, I at least did not get like the New Yorker or Time magazine subscription growing up. And journalism was really alien to me. And I worked really hard to understand newsrooms and to fit in and to understand how things work. But I want to create an environment where it's not so hard to do that, where it's people from all different backgrounds actually feel comfortable, and you have to do less of that work that I think we have to do to feel like, we fit in. I'm not speaking ill of any previous places I've worked. I just think that that's just a natural thing that happens in newsrooms. And I think having a diverse newsroom is a part of that, but more than that, it's really having a culture where people feel comfortable, speaking, know that they have a place to thrive, and and feel like they're doing the kind of work they want to. And then the last part is the coverage. I believe that every writer of every background needs to think about race and identity in all the work they do. If you're covering internet culture or if you're covering transportation, race and identity do play a role in that. And that's not always easy, especially if it's not your lived experience. And so we have been, at Vox trying to figure out how we can give people the training, the help to make sure they're doing the work that has a kind of intersectionality that I think is necessary to thrive in journalism today.
And I think it's what you were saying earlier as well, just about having that culture is so critical just to getting the coverage, because once you have eliminated that barrier to entry that so many people do face. And even if it is coming from a place of just not feeling comfortable and not feeling confident, just kind of eliminating that really opens so many doors. And I think a lot of that also starts with what you're doing at UC Berkeley, Geeta, with how, you know, students feel more confident and open to even attempting to enter these spaces. So I guess, how are you uplifting students and getting them out into the world and really helping diversify mastheads at the early stage?
I mean, one of the things we've been doing well has been recruiting a diverse student body. 56% of our students are from underrepresented groups.
Oh, wow.
Not including international students. But the challenge is making sure we support those students financially so they can actually become journalists. So I've been laser focused since becoming dean on trying to support students financially so they can become journalists. So especially first generation college students. I mean, if you leave here with $70,000 in debt, how are you going to take those entry-level jobs that are stepping stones to careers? So I just came in saying, I'm going to raise $100 million to make Berkeley journalism tuition free. And we're going to change the class and caste and race of future generations of journalists. So I've come in with this big, bold idea, and then I'm taking small steps in that direction. So the first year we raised 5 full scholarships for first generation students.
Oh, wow.
And that was really exciting to do. Also just changing our hiring process for lecturers. People were hiring people they knew, and they sort of had this view that if you didn't know the person, that meant that they weren't likely very qualified. And I found that when we changed that policy to do searches for every lecturer position open, it was astonishing just how many qualified people there were of all kinds of different racial and sexual identities. So it isn't that difficult. And then thirdly, changing the culture. We've been doing trainings in how to create more equitable classrooms, and the entire faculty has been participating in monthly trainings because we know we have to change the culture. If we're bringing in a diverse student body, we better know how to communicate and support that diverse student body. And it isn't easy, and we make mistakes every single day, but it takes that intensive work to make a difference.
I think having that intention and sense of purpose is so important. I think something that, you know, has only evolved in recent years. It's not like this is how things were when I was in J school, some almost 20 years ago. So I think it's great to hear some of these changes are being made and how some of these students are really going to be able to enter the workforce in a very empowered way. So thank you for all that you're doing there. And I think I also just have a bit of a selfish question for all of you, because obviously I'm also very new in this leadership role, and I'm just kind of curious and nosy about how other people are doing things and what I can learn. So I guess I think we're all relatively new in our tenures, but what are some of the important things that you've learned so far, and the most valuable advice, I guess, that you would impart to someone who's just embarking on a new leadership role in journalism today? Maybe Geeta, can we start with you?
So I guess I was surprised at how well journalism prepares you for a leadership role. I had been a reporter for 27 years, and I had not even been an editor. And I came here as a professor, and one thing led to another, and I was dean of the journalism school. But I found that I had problem-solving skills. Every story is a problem you have to solve, and those were good skills. I had crisis management skills. Every story was a crisis, and every day is a crisis in a leadership role. So I found that being a journalist had prepared me quite well for this job. And I guess the main piece of advice I would give is just to take big risks, to think huge, and not to be afraid to fail. Because I just think that there's so many there's so many opportunities right now in this moment to change the field of journalism, to change our democracy. There's so many vital things at stake that there are too many important things to do to think small. And there's just tremendous momentum for making huge changes in inclusivity and in the way we practice journalism. So this is the moment to take huge risks.
I think that's definitely great advice, and especially just what you were saying about how journalism prepares you, just the ability to ask questions and be curious. Like, it's just, no matter what, you're always going to learn things by asking, and I think we know how to ask questions better than anyone out there. Swati, I guess, how are things going for you? What are some of the lessons you've learned so far that you could share?
I think this may sound cliche, but listening is the biggest lesson. I think one thing when you think about one reason what all of us can bring to the roles that maybe previous generations didn't is that kind of strongman era of leading is over. I mean, you still have to make tough decisions, but you have to explain them and talk to people, listen to people. And that is a big, that is something that I think about all the time. And I spend so much of, I spend all day on Zoom, as all of you do, but it's really just talking to people. And I think, that's something I would definitely advise anyone to do. And then I think the other thing is have a network of people you can rely on. Again, there's a lot of SAJA members. I even this week talked to like 3 of them and got their advice on various things. And that, I call them my board of directors, and they're the people I go to. I ask advice. I don't really make big decisions without them. That goes a long way. And I would say, I think figure out what your leadership style is. I really believe in leading with empathy and generosity, but I also believe clarity is kindness. Though, that can be hard when you do, offer tough feedback or make a tough decision. I just think you still have to do those things. We're in leadership roles. We're in charge of businesses. That happens. But how you explain those decisions, how you communicate them is the key. And that's something I just am constantly working on and thinking about.
But then aren't there any interesting challenges that come with trying to communicate over Zoom when you haven't met your team yet? Like, how have you navigated that part of it?
Totally. But now I love it, because I don't know if you guys have like that, the Zoom command on Slack where you can just start a Zoom right away. So that's all I'm doing all day with my team, and I'm just Zooming with them and talking to them. So in some ways, yes, it's really hard to connect with people over Zoom. On the other hand, I feel like people are somehow more open. You can ask more direct questions and you can talk to more people. Like, I don't know how I would be able to talk to, all the people I work with if Zoom wasn't there, because it just almost has made it so easy to talk all the time. I love talking to people in person, but we are, Vox is remote by default, so that this is going to be our reality forever. And I actually think it has a lot of upsides, and that's the things that Versha was saying, being able to hire people from all sorts of locations is really important to me. But then on top of that, being able to easily communicate with people and see them is a huge plus.
And I see a comment just came in from Rimjim Day saying listening is a skill that many leaders sadly lack. So great. And the other thing I agree with what you said is how I don't think people realize how important these outside networks are, like your little group of people that you turn to for advice, your secret behind the scenes people helping you out. I think we all have ours. And there's definitely some big decisions that I do not make without running them by them. So I think that is probably one of the biggest things I've learned in this role is how important it is to have your team at all times. So Versha, I'd love to hear from you. What have you learned, and what are some of the biggest lessons you would like to share from your time?
Yeah, I co-sign everything that has been said so far. A lot of it is exactly what I was going to say. The importance of listening, when you're first starting a job, especially in a newsroom, doing a listening tour is something that some new leaders have talked about, where you're meeting with different people in all sorts of different departments and really understanding how the newsroom and the company works. I think traditionally, sometimes reporters and editors shy away from learning the business side of the industry. But I think if we're all in this together to try and build sustainable revenue models for journalism, which I think we all want, then it's important to learn some of those things, or at least have conversations with people on that side of the company. And so I really tried to do a listening tour that involves everybody who touches any part of Teen Vogue, editorial, creative, production, or sales and business. It's definitely an ongoing process. As you know, Condé Nast is absolutely massive, a lot bigger than Now This was. There are a lot of lot more departments and different department heads to deal with. But I think it's really interesting to learn how people are working, how they've made this remote virtual world work for the last 18 months, especially when we're talking about something as creative as magazines, right? Not just collaborative journalism, but magazines in particular. So I think the listening and leading with empathy, like Swati said, is something that is also incredibly important to me. I think it's something that I have not experienced as a newsroom employee in the past. And so I give credit to some of the less than favorable managers I've had for showing me how not to manage. And I agree with Geeta when she talks about how being a reporter and a journalist can really prepare you for problem solving skills and being a good leader. However, I don't necessarily think journalists and editors are naturally good managers a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been a problem in newsrooms in the past is you climb the company ladder or the hierarchy, and somebody thinks that a natural promotion for an editor is to give them a team of people to manage. That's not necessarily the right decision. And so that's why listening and empathy is so, so important. So you can make sure you're actually learning, you know, the ins and outs of actual people management and everything that entails, because I think that has often been overlooked in the past.
I think that was such a great point that you made, that so much of what we learn or end up trying to do is what we've seen done, like do the opposite of what we've seen done and just try not to be like some of the examples we've seen, and you just learn your own path that way. But I think what you were saying also about the listening tour is really interesting, because how does that work on Zoom? Because I can see how doing that in the office is a whole different experience. Like how has that been for you? And have you kind of had to adapt what you would have normally preferred to do? And how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we can all agree here. It can be exhausting at times when you're on 8 Zoom calls a day. So I really try to space that out as much as possible and be respectful of people's hours and people's time. But I do think even though there's, you know, maybe a little bit of awkwardness the first time you're meeting somebody over Zoom, like Swati said, again, like that falls away pretty quickly once you get into the meat of the conversation and just ask people how their work has been going, what they've been doing, you know, what they would like to see done in the next months and years. I haven't found that super challenging at all. I've enjoyed being able to talk to people at different parts of the company. And again, an advantage of the remote world is that I've spoken to people in LA, in London, in DC, all over, and it hasn't been a problem of having to, you know, necessarily travel to meet them.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so I think something else I've been curious about is, obviously all of us have done some sort of a career transition, but we've seen a lot of our colleagues go in different directions with, you know, starting Substacks or just finding other interesting ways to adapt their reporting or storytelling talents. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on some of these moves that you've seen, and what are some of the interesting transitions you've seen that might be setting the tone for the future of journalism, or where some of the next steps for us might be. So Swati, is there anything interesting you've been seeing out there?
Yeah, I hope that this, you know, if people want to start Substacks, that's great for them. But I believe that in a newsroom, I really like editors. I've always been an editor. I do believe that I hope this means that newsrooms really do take the culture so seriously. You know, there's been you know, I commend all the journalists who spoke out against burnout and how hard it's been doing some of these jobs. And, you know, we really have to create environments where people know they can take time off, like what Versha was saying. Make sure there's set hours, make sure you're not bothering people when they don't need to be bothered, and make sure you're setting those boundaries. And I feel like that newsroom culture will go a long way. I think again, management skills have not always been something that have been, you know, the main thing that people value in journalism. And I hope that's changing. I hope that people are seeing the value of that, because I think when writers and editors feel like they belong, feel like they, you know, again, they might not always be happy, but that there is room for them, there is a place for them, and that they feel heard. I do think that makes people want to stay in newsrooms and still stay a part of the community. And I think a lot of the things that we're all doing here will hopefully just make it so that more and more people, you know, want to stay in journalism and want to, you know, keep working at organizations.
Great. And then, I mean, I think definitely it's the value of the newsroom and having a team and the checks and balances that come with it is so critical. So yeah, it's an interesting move that I've been seeing a lot of colleagues doing, but I know for me, I'm really excited to be working with a team for now in a more traditional format, even if it is still virtual. Versha, have you seen other interesting career moves happening around you?
I have. I mean, I feel like it's largely the same for most of us. It's the Substacks or the newsletter writers. I've also seen people making the conscious decision to go freelance, even though that's challenging for a number of reasons. But because of some of the issues that are being mentioned here, because companies and managers aren't taking burnout seriously, because they're not looking or respecting people's boundaries or hours. And so I think that's a trend, again, for managers and newsroom leaders to look at in particular, is why are people making career changes, or why are they deciding freelance is better than full-time? Looking at those trends, I think, is really important to just ongoing labor trends that we're actually seeing across industries, all across America and across the world. That's not limited to the journalism industry by any means, but it's something that's very, very important for us to pay attention to.
Definitely. And I've gone in the opposite direction, having gone from freelance to being an editor, but I really enjoyed my time as a freelancer. I think the freedom, the ability to focus on exactly what you want to work on, it's really important. So I definitely understand why a lot of people are going in that direction, especially after the year we've had. And then Geeta, since you're kind of obviously at a journalism school and you're helping shape the futures of a lot of these aspiring journalists, what interesting new aspirations are you seeing some of the students have in the different directions you think they might go? Because I know a lot of the jobs that exist now definitely did not exist when I was in J school 20 years ago. So it's kind of an interesting position to be at.
One of the most interesting things my students ask me is, how can we actually have balanced lives and give all that journalism asks of you? And what I've been saying to them is, you can do different things at different times in your life, and you can become a freelancer for a time, and then you can go back and work on staff somewhere, and then you can be editor-in-chief of a publication. One of the exciting things I've seen being at the school is seeing my peers take leadership roles of organizations. Carrie Lozano was a lecturer here, and she went on to become head of documentary film at Sundance. Janice Huey was managing director of the investigative reporting program, and she went on to take a leadership position at Frontline. So it's been exciting. I'm seeing the opportunity today with all the creativity in journalism and all the Substacks and all of the opportunities to have a more flexible career and balance your life better and take opportunities when you have more space in your life to devote more time to them.
I think that's a trend we're seeing across the board in so many different fields right now, people taking charge of their own time and really deciding what their work-life balance means to them. And I think also one thing I'm curious about is, and I know we're sort of starting to run out of time, but we are at this interesting transition. I see Swati, you're in the office. Versha, I was very jealous to see all the pictures from Teen Vogue's birthday last week. So I guess, how are you navigating this return back to normalcy? And hopefully this will be our last virtual SAJA ever, and we'll be in person next year. So I guess, what has this interesting transition point been like with the vaccination rates, and then also having to be cautious about how you navigate? What different changes, I guess, have you seen in your different organizations? And Versha, I'd like to start with you because I'm curious about your party.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to be as COVID safe as possible. I think there's a lot of Zoom fatigue, understandably. I think a lot of people are excited to get back to in-person events as safely as possible. And so that's, we're following the public health guidance. We're following the science. We required proof of vaccination for our party. I've been to different events where they ask for proof of vaccination and a negative COVID test in the 30 hours leading up to an event. I think different organizations are instituting different kinds of rules. We also kept the party largely outdoors. So that's why we wanted to have it in early October in New York. We're like, we think the weather will still be good, but we're talking about a December in-person event in LA because we know that the weather will probably be okay for an outdoors event there. So at least in event and experiential planning, we're following public health guidance and trying to make it as easy as possible on people with the option of outdoors, asking people to wear masks indoors, even if they are vaccinated, and just continuing in that vein.
Mm-hmm. And then Swati, like I said, we see you in your office right now. What has the return to office life been like for Vox?
The way that I take, like, a day at a time, because you think it's going to change and then it goes back to how it was, as we've experienced. So I really, I try to just go with the flow. And, I'm in DC. I live in DC, and I come into the office a couple times a week. I'm going to New York next week, and I really do try to, I do a lot of like Zoom office hours. Not enough. I should do more, but I have provided just time for people to come talk to me, to find time on my calendar, and I try to be really open to those requests, even though there's a million things to do. But I just think that's so incredibly important, because Vox is we're remote by default, so you don't really have to be, you can live in a lot of US cities and towns. So because of that, I try to be really flexible. I try to be really to be available. And to be honest, I think there's a lot more I have to think about and do. I feel like people don't like virtual happy hours, but I probably have to do more of those. Well, I'll take any tips on what to do there.
I think we should stick around and see how the tonight's goes, right? That sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to that. All right, so I guess as we are going to start wrapping this up, I know for all of us, we've arrived at these positions without really a clear roadmap of models of South Asian women in these positions when we were starting out. There are definitely amazing people out there doing the work, and people that I reached out to throughout my earlier part of my career. But for somebody now in their early 20s looking to start on a road towards journalism, to see women like you in the roles that you're at right now is really inspiring. So what advice do you give to aspiring journalists today who want to follow in your footsteps and accomplish what you've accomplished? And let's start with Geeta.
I tell them that it's just the most interesting, important work. You're at the event, listening to the speaker. You're where everyone wishes they could be, but they have to be at their job. And so you're there doing the listening for them. And that there's nothing more transformational than actually listening to people talk about their lives and their experiences. So this is by far the most meaningful, interesting job you could have. And I tell them to focus on the work, even at the journalism school, that yes, we have all these networking events. Yes, you can go to class, and that's really important to go to class and listen to people, but try to focus on doing the work and learning to tell the stories in the most powerful way. That in the end, it's the work that matters. That it's not, people think, oh, it's just this glamorous career. And I try and dispel them of that notion, because if you're not willing to grind your nose into the dirt, you can't do this work. Anyway.
And I think that's so important. We all have to be focused about building the brand and the tweeting and all the other stuff that comes with it. But it all starts with the work. And that is the one thing that can't fall by the wayside through all of the other things we're now forced to take on as well. Swati, I guess, what is your biggest advice that you would give to women that want to follow in your footsteps?
There are a couple of things. One, I already talked about the board of directors, like find your people. They're not always like, the people on my board. I know it's cheesy, but it works for me. It's people, who I worked for, but it's also people, who are my peers, or sometimes, people who reported to me. I think it's people who get you and who help you and are real with you. And that has helped me a lot. But I think the biggest thing for me is that really, know your story, know why you're here. I think there's, of course, we all have to adapt. We always have to try to do, we have to figure out how organizations work, how they function, but like just never lose yourself. And I think that's easier when you know your story. And, I shared mine earlier, why I'm in journalism. And I feel like if everyone can share in like 2 sentences why we're doing what we're doing, it makes life easier, because when you have those tough decisions, you can look back at, at why you're here, and suddenly things become easier. And I think, and when that happens, I just always like to stay focused, look ahead, keep moving. And, we all make mistakes, think about the mistakes, but keep going, and rely on your network, rely on your personal mission of why you're doing this, and things just become easier.
Great, very sound advice. And then Versha, I'd like to give you the last word. What is the most important, valuable advice that you would give to aspiring journalists?
I would say two things super quickly, because I know we are also short on time. In addition to what Swati and Geeta said, which is really fantastic advice, I think focusing on the work, as Geeta said, figure out the stories that you want to tell. What stories are most interesting to you? What communities are most interesting to you? Embed yourself, listen and learn, and make sure that you are humble enough to keep learning in your reporting. And then also, don't be afraid to experiment and don't be afraid to fail. Not everything is going to work out the way that you anticipate, but that's how we all learn and grow and evolve as reporters and editors. So I'm very excited for everybody. Good luck.
Thank you. And I think that's such an important tone to end on, because we all need to be open and ready to fail and learn from our mistakes, because we still do that no matter how far we get in our careers. So thank you to all of you, Swati, Versha, and Geeta. This was an amazing conversation. You're all so inspiring. I'm very excited to continue following you and what you're doing. And I guess I will hand it over to Mihir then. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and we will hopefully meet you all in person next year.
Great. Thank you so much for moderating that conversation. That was awesome. I can't say, I mean, I've like been in a few newsrooms, and it's really easy to get disheartened. And especially in this past year, I feel like, you know, things can look really bleak, but you know, hearing people talk about leadership and empathy and like changing things, I don't know about you, but that makes me feel pretty good about the future.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think just the makeup of the panel makes me very excited about the future of journalism too. So
Cool.
Thank you so much for coordinating this.
Thank you so much for doing it. It was really awesome. Well, that was incredible. And thank you again to Sarah and our panelists for an awesome conversation. So in case you missed me in the beginning, my name is Mihir Zaveri, and I'm the president of SAJA. This is our second year in a row holding our annual awards night online. It's been difficult, presented new challenges, but we're still proud to highlight some of the very best journalism and journalists out there. We're in part 2 of the evening, which is the awards ceremony. Part 3 is going to be after this, which is a virtual after party. So you need to register for that. So if you want to, go to saja.org and do that now. I want to take this time again to thank our sponsors for the evening, the New York Times, NBC Universal, the Gower Family Foundation, and a big thank you to DigiMentors, for helping us produce and broadcast this for the second year running. And I'd like to make a short pitch on 2 fronts. If you don't know this about SAJA, we're an entirely volunteer-run organization. I'm a volunteer. Our board's volunteers. We don't pay anyone to do anything, and so we run on donations. If you could please consider supporting us by donating at saja.org/donate now, that would be very much appreciated. Any amount helps. And I'd like to make even one more pitch. If you're not a member yet, please consider becoming one, and you can do that at saja.org. It helps us grow our community, reach more people with our scholarships, fellowships, other events that we put on like this. So if you're not a member, please become one. And now we'll turn to the reason for the evening, unveiling the winners of this year's SAJA Awards. One of the core components of SAJA's mission is to help improve coverage of South Asia and its diaspora. And these awards are one way in which we can recognize and highlight great journalism. Just a very quick outline of how this worked in the process. This summer, people who submitted their pieces from all around the world, which had been published in the year 2020. Then we, SAJA, we recruited dozens of experts, volunteer judges to grade each submission on a few different factors, which include writing quality, originality, exclusivity, and a few other factors. We then averaged all these scores to get our finalists and winners for each category. After this event, we're going to post all the names and the publications of all the finalists and winners on our website. So if you don't catch it now, you can read about it then. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to our first award, which recognizes great journalism by students. Here are the finalists. And this year's winner is Aisha Khan for her piece, A Long Time Coming. These Muslims are bringing sex abuse by sheikhs out of the shadows. And this was published by the Religion News Service in January. Judges had great things to say about this story. It was very deeply reported, a lot of voices and a lot of perspectives that were shown throughout the piece. So congratulations to Aisha. Now I'm going to move to our next category. This is going to recognize reporting on any subject by a journalist of South Asian background. It's kind of a difficult category to judge because there's a wide variety of submissions. You're sort of looking at different types of pieces. But, throughout the judging process, we came up with our finalists, and here they are. And I would like to say this year's winner is Sonia Paul for her piece published in Politico magazine in October, titled How Hindu Nationalism Could Shape the Election. One judge said that they thought it was a really interesting and deeply reported story on a topic that we don't hear much about. The reporter did a great job at explaining why this matters to the general public. Another judge said it was original, timely, and smart. Big congratulations to Sonia. Next, we'll look at health reporting. This has obviously been a especially important topic over the past couple years. Don't need to tell anybody that. And here are our finalists. And the winners are Devjot Ghoshal, Saurabh Sharma, Subrata Nagchaudhuri for their coverage of the coronavirus in India in a series of stories for Reuters in 2020. When we post the link to these stories, you can read through them and you can see, how they take us throughout the year and kind of capture a different facet of the coronavirus and how it hit India. There are a lot of headlines about that, and these journalists did a great job capturing all of that. One judge called their work a comprehensive and deeply reported package of stories capturing the breadth of the pandemic's early stages. Congratulations, Devjot, Saurabh, and Subrata. Next, we are moving to the essay and opinion category. Here are this year's finalists. And the winner is Anjali Khosla for her essay published in Gossamer magazine about a display of so-called Indian villagers at a Liberty & Co. department store. Here's what one judge had to say. I love this piece. It takes a big topic but focuses it on a small department store and one ill-fated attempt to bring authentic India to England by way of exploiting vulnerable individuals. It is thoughtful, focused, and concise. Leaves the reader with much to think about and doesn't hit them over the head with a certain message. It is an exemplary piece for this category. Congratulations, Anjali. Our next category is business reporting. Here are the finalists. And the winners are Joanna Slater, Kareem Fahim, and Katie McHugh for their story published in the Washington Post in October called Migration in Reverse. That looked at how the pandemic prompted thousands of foreign workers who had left South Asian countries looking for work to return in the reversal of typical migration patterns. One judge said the piece was very well done and incredibly timely. Another judge said, the best journalism effortlessly weaves the story of what is happening with the lives of those it affects. This WAPO piece succeeded in that effort. It combined COVID and migration to movingly tell the story of one family while simultaneously delving into issues such as migrant labor, remittances, and development. Congratulations, Joanna, Kareem, and Katie. Our next category is arts and culture reporting. Here are the finalists. And we have a tie in this category. Two submissions scored exactly the same. The first winner is, you might recognize her, Sarah Khan, for her piece Zanzibar in the Rain that was published in January in the New York Times that looked at the confluence of three cultures on the archipelago in the Indian Ocean just off the coast of Tanzania. Judges said it was wonderfully descriptive of the sights and tastes. Our other winner is Dylan Barth, whose video about an ancient Indian art form was published in Business Insider in December. Here's what one judge said. It was a moving illustration of a disappearing form of art and how the lack of tourists in the coronavirus pandemic and the economic consequences created by the pandemic had affected artisans in a family-owned business. It was emotional to follow this family's journey, and I was grateful to learn about an art form I hadn't known about. Congratulations, Sarah, and congratulations, Dylan. And now our final category, the Daniel Pearl Award. This is established in honor of Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl, who was kidnapped and killed in 2002 while reporting in Pakistan. Daniel was a regular participant in SAJA's activities. This award recognizes outstanding explanatory or investigative reporting that exhibits the kind of courage and integrity that Pearl embodied in his work. Here are the finalists. And the winner is Muhammad Ali, for his powerful profile of a man who used and was fueled by social media to push Hindu extremism. Several judges remarked that this was among the best pieces of journalism they had read in the entire year. And the piece included a very harrowing interview that Muhammad conducted with the subject, which you can feel the tension between the two, because Muhammad, as he says, is Muslim, and this man has been pushing Hindu extremism for a long time. So congratulations, Muhammad. Those are the winners of this year's SAJA Awards. I'm proud of all the pieces that we picked. I think we have shown that there's great journalism being done about South Asia and the diaspora, and I hope that inspires people to continue to do great journalism. So that wraps the awards ceremony. We are going to now move into part 3 of our evening, and which, again, if you didn't catch before, I'm very excited about. This includes basically a virtual happy hour where you'll be able to join a virtual room, interact with people, have conversations, join and leave, build communities, and do things that we haven't done for a long time in person, and hope we can get to that later. I'd also like to take this time to again thank the sponsors for this event. Sponsors being the New York Times, NBC Universal, DigiMentors, and the Gore Family Foundation. And once again, if you could go to our website and consider donating or becoming a member, we'd greatly appreciate that. I'm going to hand it off now for a brief introduction of what we are to expect in the coming minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mihir. It's a pleasure to join you, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today for the show. We're going to move into the networking phase in just a moment. My name is Neil Parekh, and I am the Vice President of Events and Communications at DigiMentors, and we're proud to have been one of the sponsors of this great event. We're longtime supporters of SAJA, as I'm sure you know. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of how the spatial chat room works. If you've registered for the event on Eventbrite, you would have gotten the link to spatial chat earlier. If you hadn't registered and still are interested, please go to the SAJA website and click on Eventbrite, and you'll get the link for the room. What I want to do is just to give you a quick idea of what to expect when you click on the link. We'll put it on the screen real quick. This is what you're going to get when you go to the website, the spatial chat website. And what you do is you just put in your name. I'll put in my name, and you can see I did this earlier. You have to type something in the about section, so you can say where you're from, what school, where you work, etc. So I'm going to type in DigiMentors and click continue. You'll get to a screen where you can check your camera and your microphone to make sure it's picking up your camera and microphone. Chrome will work best, but Firefox will work as well. And then you click Join Space. When you do that, you'll be dropped into the room. You'll be in the lobby. We already see several people are here already. This is going to be the spatial chat orientation and help desk. And you can see, you can move yourself around. You can go talk to people. There's me here over there. If my microphone was on, we could be talking right there. And then there are also rooms on the right-hand side. As you can see who's there in the room. You can click on a person. What I like best is that you can click on someone's name and teleport and get right next to them if you want to talk to them. There's a room for networking and a room for our erstwhile SAJA veterans. For some people, they're referred to as old timers. I don't think they're very old myself, but SAJA veterans, if you want to hang out there, you can. But please go ahead and join us in this new networking space called Spatial Chat. Again, if you haven't, if you don't have the link, you need to register at the SAJA website, saja.org. Click on the link for Eventbrite, and then you'll get the link for Spatial Chat. We hope you'll be able to join us, and we'll get to do some old-time networking in this room, and we'll explain more in the space. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's panel discussion, moderated by Sarah Khan, and of course the award ceremony. Congratulations to everyone who won awards this evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.